The movie opens with a monologue from a girl named Melody who has cerebral palsy. She loves watching her pet fish Ollie while her parents prepare for them to head out. Her father, Chuck, helps her eat, while her sister, Penny, hides inside the shelf to not go to school. However, her mother, Diane, manages to get her out. Melody cannot talk and has the urge to, but in the morning rush, Diane walks out to take care of Penny. While Chuck is on his way out, Melody signals to let him switch on the TV for her. While she is watching it, sadly her pet fish Ollie jumps out of the tank and lands on the floor. Seeing this, Melody tries hard calling out for her father, but he cannot hear her. She tries to spray the water over Ollie, but it ends up with her moving the fish tank to fall on the floor. It misses Ollie by a few inches and Melody continues to call out for her dad. Hearing her scream, he finally runs in to ask if she is okay. Finding Ollie on the floor, he says that Melody should be careful with her trolley. She tries to point at her sheet of answers to tell him what happened, but he tells her to stay quiet. After getting in the car, Chuck apologizes to Melody for yelling at her. She wants to tell him that it's not her fault, but she cannot talk. Right then, their neighbor Mrs. V comes out to greet them, but Chuck tells her that they are running late and drives out. Melody goes to school, but her class is in a separate building, in which she has been in since kindergarten. Melody goes in and meets her close friend Maria, who shows Melody a drawing she made. After that, Mrs. Bill comes to ask what Melody wants to do, and Chuck watches as she puts on headphones for Melody to listen to an audiobook. Chuck leaves and Melody watches the kids play out on the field. Surprisingly, Melody is visited by a volunteer named Catherine. She asks if it's okay to take off her headphones. After Melody agrees, Catherine introduces herself and continues to talk about the book she is listening to. Catherine tells her that she has read the book too and shares the part she loves. Being asked about which part she liked, Melody tries to answer and has a good time with Catherine. A while later, we find Chuck speaking with the principal and the teachers about Melody's curriculum. They tell him that Melody is a good kid and she has no trouble in class and always meets their expectations. Hearing this, Chuck suggests that they provide something better for his daughter. Catherine, who is also here, agrees with Chuck. The principal introduces her as a postdoctoral fellow volunteering here for her thesis. As Catherine continues, Diane comes in and their conversation stops right there. Back at home, the Brooks are preparing for Halloween and they hear someone at the door. Chick goes out to greet them dressed as Einstein, but he is surprised to find it was Catherine. Melody turns to look excited to hear her voice, and Diane walks out to greet her as well. Catherine suggests having Melody integrate into regular classrooms once a week, but Diane finds it difficult since it was hard for Melody to mingle in the special ed and it is too soon for her to shift to a normal one. However, Chuck views it differently since it might be a good opportunity for Melody, but Diane strongly refuses. But even still, Catherine hands over the plans and promises to them that she will be accompanying Melody at all times. After she leaves, the parents walk in to find a curious Melody looking at them, but Diane avoids telling her what Catherine was here for. Chuck buds in asking them to get ready to go trick-or-treating. Melody is an astronaut and the neighbors come to cheer for her as she drives out from the garage. However, Melody yearns to dress like the other girls and get along with them. Seeing her look sad, Maria, who is also here, asks her to race her and cheers her up. The next day, Mrs. V comes in to give the girls a few dresses. Melody loves them and so does Penny. Mrs. V helps herself to some cookies and happens to notice the forms that Catherine left for Melody. She reads it out loud for Melody to hear and Chuck tells her that they haven't discussed it yet, but Melody comes over smiling and showing them she wants to do it. Mrs. V walks over giving Diane and Chuck some space. She tells Melody that her parents are feeling protective of her and nothing else, but Melody tells her that it's unfair. So Mrs. V tells her to be strong and leaves. In the morning, Chuck comes to wake up Melody, but she insists on not going to school. Chuck lays down next to her and pretends to snore, and this makes Melody laugh. Chuck picks her up and places her on her chair. Melody refuses to eat her breakfast and Diane argues with Chuck, mentioning how worried she is about sending Melody off to a normal class. Chuck stands firm supporting Melody and finally Diane gives in, saying that Chuck will be the one at fault if this causes more harm than help to Melody. Chuck signs the forms and Melody smiles happily seeing the approved form. Melody spends the following days happily with her family and soon comes the day where she attends a normal class at the Spalding Elementary School. Mr. Dimming teaches history and while the students are actively involved, Catherine comes in along with Melody and another kid called Willie. They join the class and Melody takes a place at the back of the class, noticing the obvious gazes from the rest of the kids at class. Mr. Dimming proceeds with the class and asks them who was the first European to discover America. One kid answers as Christopher Columbus, but Dimming says that it's wrong. While the others don't come up with the answer, Melody raises her hand. Dimming asks her to answer, and since she doesn't have the prepaid template with her, Melody points towards a drawing of a leaf on the wall and Catherine answers for her as Leif Erikson. A girl named Claire raises her hand to point out that Melody did not answer the question herself. Dimming follows up asking another question to Melody and she proceeds to spell it out this time. But the other kid, Willie, speaks out that it's boring, followed by the other kids snickering. Despite this, Melody spells out the answer, but Dimming openly shows that he is not comfortable. After class, Dimming asks to speak with Catherine, who leaves Melody to get along with the other kids. So Melody tries speaking to one, pointing out that she finds her shoes are cool. The girl's name is Rose and she is kind enough to answer back, but soon runs off hearing Claire calling for her. Back home, Diane gives Melody a bath and mentions that there is a space exhibit at a nearby university on the weekend. Melody asks if she can bring a friend along. Diane asks if she wants to call Maria, but Melody wants to invite her new friend Rose. On the planned day, Rose visits Melody at her house and Diane lets her in. Penny comes to play with Rose and soon they go to the university together. They let Rose and Melody go on their own, but Chuck soon spots Melody being alone, so he comes to have a talk with Rose. Melody strides away to the screening and Chuck soon finds her. There is a documentary about Stephen Hawking playing there and Chuck says he is just the same as Melody. Hearing that, Melody points that she also wants to talk. Next up, we find a shocked Chuck looking at the price of the machine. Diane walks in to see what he is doing and he tells her about the AAC, Augmentative and Alternative Communication. Diane thinks she doesn't need it, but Chuck mentions how she is getting old and she has things to say too. Diane asks him how much it cost and Chuck tells her about the device called the Medi Talker and it costs $17,000. He also says that he called insurance, but the lady listened to him for hours only to mention that her shift is over and she has to leave. Diane tells him that she will take care of that. The next day, Diane visits the insurance office and asks to meet the boss. While the lady tells her the boss is busy that day, Diane doesn't consider her and goes to sit down outside the boss's room. Seeing this, the woman calls to inform her boss. At this time, Chuck and Melody are out shopping for new shoes. Diane calls Chuck to inform that the insurance company has agreed to sponsor, but they require Melody to take an assessment for them to confirm on their side. So Melody meets with a doctor who shows her a bunch of cards and starts the assessment, while her parents wait outside worried owing to the long duration of the test. The doctor shows Melody cards showing a tomato, a red balloon, strawberry, cherry, and a banana and asks her to pick the odd one out. Melody is flustered between the banana that stands out in yellow and the red balloon which is not edible. After pondering a bit, she picks out the red balloon as the odd one out, but sees the doctor giving her the look. Melody starts worrying that she should have picked the banana. After this, the doctor calls her parents to inform them that Melody does not meet the requirements and has failed the assessment. Seeing Diane stand worried, Melody understands what her result turned out to be. Melody gets agitated for losing the chance. That night, Chuck assures that he is going to get her to talk. The next day, Chuck takes Melody to meet Catherine and asks if she knows someone who could approve the assessment for the insurance to buy a Medi Talker. Seeing that there is no mention of a specific doctor required to do the assessment, Catherine fills the form herself and gives the approval. In the next scene, we see Diane unboxing the Medi Talker for Melody. Mrs. V is also there to share the moment and support them. Melody is very excited to have the device and Penny joins her to set up and start the thing going, as Diane and Mrs. V watch over them. In the evening, Chuck returns home as it rains and he is greeted by Melody, who comes out to use the device and announces that Ollie jumped on his own. Hearing his daughter's thoughts for the first time, Chuck gets emotional despite those words not being those he wanted to hear first. Penny comes out along with Diane and they spend the rest of the day hearing what Melody's got to say. The following day, Melody happily attends school and answers Dimming's question using the device, but he calls her out to wait till he gives the okay for her to answer, which makes her sad immediately. After that, Dimming announces that the tryouts for the Whiz Kids will be coming up and the kids need to prepare for the test. Melody is excited and interested to try out for the team. After class, she hears Rose mentioning to Claire that her mother wanted her to make the team this year. Melody approaches them and tries using the device to start a conversation, but they leave her there. Catherine comes to cheer her up and finds that she doesn't have enough options on the device to convey her thoughts. Later, Diane walks in to find Chuck helping up with adding the words and dialogues to the device as suggested by Catherine. Chuck hands the device to Diane to add more and he savors the moment since it is the first time in ages they spent time together in pure bliss. The following days pass by pretty normal for Melody, and then one day after class, she approaches Rose suggesting that she will help her prepare for the tryouts. Rose questions how she is going to do that and Melody opens up the quiz section as the device asks them general trivia. Intrigued, Rose accepts her offer and the next day, Chuck takes Melody to visit Rose. Rose's mom invites them in and places cardboard on the floor for Melody to ride in. Rose apologizes to Melody for this, mentioning that her mom is a clean freak. They start with the trivia, but it ends up with Rose asking Melody what happened to her. Melody explains about her condition and Rose asks her if it hurts. Hearing this, Melody mentions that the gaze of those around her is what hurts her most. Seeing how the mood went down, Melody restarts the trivia and they spend time as Rose tries answering the questions. The next day is the day of the tryout and Melody is late for class, but Dimming is surprised to see her and asks what she is doing here. Melody reveals her interest to try out for the team as well. Claire immediately points out that she cannot since she is from the special room. Rose speaks out for Melody, asking Claire whether she is scared of losing to Melody. Dimming walks over to ask her once more if she is sure to participate since it is competitive and not a normal club thing. Melody answers that she is not fragile, and hearing this, Dimming goes to get her answer sheet. The tryout begins as the kids start answering 100 questions, and after as they head out, Rose tries to get Claire and the others get along with Melody, but they outright walk out on them. Right then, Mrs. V comes to pick up Melody, and as she leaves, Rose invites her to visit the mall together on the weekend. Melody accepts and they have a great time at the mall together while Chuck looks after Penny. On Monday, Deming announces the results of the tryouts. Claire and Rose made the team along with 2 other boys, but sadly Melody finds that she didn't make it. Rose comes later to cheer her up, but Melody feels confident that she did really well on the test. At home, Mrs. V, Diane and Chuck argue, feeling that something is wrong with the test results, but Melody tells them to stop since it will hurt Rose. Diane is confused to hear this, and the next day, Catherine joins them to question the school on what's going on. Another teacher asks Melody whether she pointed out all the answers or her helper marked them. Hearing this, Chuck gets angered as to what they find wrong in his daughter, since this is rather an accusation than questioning. Catherine also mentions that she checked Melody's answer sheet and tells them that Melody scored full marks. So, the principal asks Deming why Melody did not make the team. Cornered, Deming reveals that he never graded her sheet and does want her in the team. After this, the faculty enter the room where the team is preparing. Deming apologizes for what he did and mentions that Rose will be a substitute since she scored the lowest in the team. The principal calls out Catherine and tells her she was wrong in the first place for bringing in Melody to Deming's class. Catherine gets frustrated and thanks the principal for making her understand that the disabilities don't hold back the kids, it's the school. Catherine walks away as the principal looks at her with nothing to say. After this, Rose starts avoiding Melody. In the next scene, we arrive at the day of the Whiz Kids competition. Deming gives a speech to motivate the team while Melody is left out. The stage manager, Paul, who is also on a wheelchair, comes to greet Melody and takes her out to the stage to show her what to do. He notices that she is not feeling good and cheers her up, saying to knock out the others and have a blast in the competition. Melody returns backstage and apologizes to Rose. However, Rose mentions that she only spoke with Melody since her parents promised to buy her a new iPad. Chuck and Diane find her only then and Melody asks to go to the bathroom. Diane asks her what happened and Melody apologizes for troubling the family. Diane comforts her and says that it is not like that at all. She dances to cheer up Melody and soon the competition begins. The announcer calls the participants on stage and minions that the winning team will be qualified for the next round at Washington, where they will play to win $10,000. They get a point for each right answer and the team with the most points wins the game. Members of both teams struggle to get the answers to some questions, whereas Melody answers them all correctly. Surprisingly, at the end both the teams end up with 83 points. The announcer tells the teams to choose one participant who will fight in the lightning round, and the first one to answer wrong will be out. He gives them time to choose the player. The boys vote for Melody since she got all the answers correctly, but Claire is against it since she is not pretty. Melody is taken aback to hear this, but the boys stand up for her, saying to Claire how she will look if the team loses. The announcer calls for the chosen one from each team, and hopefully, Melody turns out to be one from her team. Both Melody and the other kid give the same answers for the first 2 questions, which turn out to be correct. However, they have different answers for the third one. While everyone is on the edge of their seats, the announcer reveals that the other kid answered incorrectly and Melody bags the win for the school. The next day, Catherine finds Melody to tell her that she is not allowed back in the class. However, Melody replies that they need her in Washington to win the competition. The following day, Mrs. V invites Melody to her house and gifts her new shoes. But at this time, the rest of the team are having breakfast together since they are leaving for the afternoon flight. At the time, Deming gets a call and tells everyone to leave right away since their flight is pushed forward due to a storm. Diane comes to pick up Melody and they reach the airport but find the elevator out of order and they rush their way through but are caught up at security. Despite the delay, they reach the gate, but the staff mentions that they have closed boarding and they cannot be allowed on board. Diane and Chuck tell him that they have to be on the flight for the competition since their daughter is on the team. Hearing this, the man mentions the rest have boarded and how they were causing ruckus for quite some time. Hearing this, Melody gets heartbroken and they return home. Chuck tells Diane that the faculty are just forwarding him back and forth between them and they are not answering properly. Diane worries how getting the device hasn't changed anything. She goes in to comfort Melody and leaves. But Melody feels so torn that she pushes the device on the floor and pours milkshake over it. Following this, Chuck calls the service center to check if the device can be fixed. Diane takes Melody out while Chuck calls out to Penny to have breakfast. However, Melody spots Penny outside heading towards the driveway. She tries signaling Diane to stop but without the device. And in the current mood, Diane doesn't notice what she is trying to say and takes the car out. She hits Penny and while Melody freaks out inside the car, Diane walks out to check what she hit and yells for Chuck. Fortunately, Diane comes to tell Melody that Penny is doing fine. Worried, Melody asks if her brain is okay and Diane answers that Penny's got only mild bruises. She takes Melody out as she watches Penny by the ambulance. Diane apologizes to Melody, saying it was her fault for not noticing, but Melody cries, feeling that she was responsible for this. Diane says that she makes mistakes all the time, but Melody has her own voice and that she has to use it to talk, scream or sing. The mother-daughter hug each other in tears and after this, They take Melody to Deming's class. He tells the kids that they can try again next year, clearly having lost the competition. He is surprised to see Melody since he was not expecting her. He apologizes to her, but Melody tells them that they would have won if they invited her for breakfast that day. Then they would have gone together, but they never treated her as part of the team. Deming interrupts her saying it's not true, but Melody tells him to first listen to what she has to say. He gets quiet and Melody takes her time while they all watch her. Melody tells them how they might feel pity or disgusted or uncomfortable on seeing her, but it is their own choice and it is their own problem and not hers. Of course she might need a push sometimes, but she is not going to be pushed around. Diane cries as she listens to this, and Melody mentions that she just wants to be in class like everyone else, so she is not going anywhere else. Diane and Chuck leave in tears, surprised to hear their daughter speak up for herself for the first time, and Melody happily listens to class and volunteers to answer in her own voice. This movie clearly portrays how one struggles to find their own voice, and Melody perfectly portrays the role connecting with us all. There's always people who are going to reject you, avoid you, and not consider your feelings. But you also have those who support you and believe you. So you must learn to find the strength in yourself to overcome the battles yourself and survive another day.